I'm frustrated. If I was a man, I would be much further along. I would get all these other opportunities that I'm not getting. Like, why am I feeling like this?
Hi, welcome back. This subject is a political minefield, so I'm going to try tread lightly when I discuss these thorny gender war topics. Because I'm male, there might already be an immediate assumption that I'm coming from a place of bias, and that may or may not be true. The call for gender equality comes from both male and female photographers. They express frustration about how their progress is hindered due to unfairness within the system.
There are far more women graduating from art and photography programs all over the world. Women make up about 80% of all students in these programs. And yet in the real world of commercial photography, women are not getting the same opportunities. How do we ensure that the images that we see and the propaganda that's created is diverse and doesn't exclude more than half the planet? We make sure that women are taking half the pictures.
So this is a topic that needs to be aired, and hopefully I can present it in a way that doesn't add to the division. In order to avoid just showing me talking in this video, I'm going to present work by female photographers that I admire. Looking back on how I viewed photographers before gender became a major issue, my choice of which photographic book to buy was simply dependent on the quality of work. Deanne Arbus, Nan Golden, Sally Mann, Mary Ellen Mark, Cindy Sherman, and many others were right up there with my favorites. At no time did I think that they were in some separate category. They were and are just great photographers that I wanted to learn from. More recently, I've been particularly drawn to the work of 3 European female photographers, Renika Dijkstra, Bettine van Maanen, and Jitka Hanslova. For me, they've developed very distinctive ways of seeing and photographing. So my starting point for this discussion is that the experience of engaging with photography becomes richer as the pool of photographers expands. The questions about achieving fairness are more complicated. Firstly, fairness for who, and who gets to decide what's fair? A follow-up question then becomes, do we have to use social engineering in order to achieve fairness? Differing discussions occur within the various photographic domains. In a recent study, it was found that 15% of photojournalists are women. So photojournalism, to a large degree, is performed by men. And the concerns are that the view lacks balance.
So what happens when our views of the world are shaped by only a male lens? Obviously, then, we're only getting the perspective and the biases of half the population, since almost every image we are surrounded by has been filtered through a man's eye and a man's mind. Let that sink in. Now is the time to take back the gaze, to take back the workplace, and to take back the cultural narrative from the men who have controlled it for hundreds of years.
Within the teaching environment, there are far more female teachers than male, and one could probably argue that this influences society to the same degree, if not more. The media subjects that female photojournalists are drawn to often differs from those that attract men, and that probably translates into what male and female audiences consume. If one is coming from a postmodern viewpoint, the conditions within the photojournalistic world need to be manipulated in order to get equity. There have been calls by some female photojournalists to compel editors to assign photographers on a 50-50 gender basis. A counter-argument is that women are not drawn to this field in equal numbers to men, and therefore one will compromise quality because the female quota will be drawn from a significantly smaller pool. It came as a great shock to researchers when they found that the more egalitarian the society, the more men and women differ in their job choices. Sweden is often referred to as one of the most egalitarian societies because it's seen as a fairer society in terms of equal rights and opportunities. Men gravitate towards jobs that are more physical and what they refer to as thing-orientated, while women gravitate towards more social, people-orientated jobs. So it doesn't seem surprising that hard photojournalism isn't dominated by women. Here's a clip by news photographer Nicole Tung, who has faced challenges while working as a photojournalist.
A lot of publications tend to hire people they've already worked with for many years, tend to be men, or think that, especially for dangerous assignments, that men are better suited to the job because they think that, the woman might be in a more vulnerable position. And I want that way of thinking to stop.
There's no doubt that Tung has seen and done things that would scare away most males. She's also returned from these situations with great pictures. 2 points regarding this. Women are obviously more susceptible to sexual assault in many parts of the world, and therefore the risk attached to assigning them to certain stories becomes greater. It's also been found that male police and soldiers react differently when women are present, and therefore embedding a female photographer is sometimes not optimal. There's a protective instinct that's been built up over the past 2 million years, and it isn't easy or necessarily beneficial to breed this out of the system. I've worked with many female photographers and journalists, and the good ones are completely on a par with the good males. Perhaps they could be described as a little bit more sensible, which is valuable when one considers issues like longevity. Lynsey Addario has proved that she is a powerful news photographer who has shot her way into a position in which she is completely judged on talent rather than on gender. Okay, now I'm going to switch to the art world. Within the painting world, the financial gap is significant. An analysis of 5,000 paintings was done, and they found that there is a 192 billion gender gap. Often the way that this disparity is presented is that work by males sells for 10 times the price of paintings produced by women, and therefore this is proof that the system is rigged. But on closer look, sales of work by the great masters and more recent giants like Picasso and Warhol contribute substantially to this difference. Within the photography art world, the first and second spots for the highest paid photographers are occupied by women, Annie Leibovitz and Cindy Sherman. Also, Cindy Sherman's untitled number 96 is in number 5 spot in terms of the highest price paid for an individual photograph. Commentators differ in their approach to the question of why so few great artists are women.
Many of us at the National Gallery have been concerned for a long time about why you can't see women visibly in our collection. There are very few paintings by women in the National Gallery because there are very few women represented, period, in the story of creative arts. And that's because for centuries women were basically excluded from history, they were excluded from positions of power, and they were excluded from doing anything that enabled them to show an independent and creative voice.
Well, I don't mean to say that men are more inherently creative than women. I feel that the sexes have an equal potential for creativity. I'm just saying that in history, the great revolutions, the great moves forward, the experimental, radical gestures have been made by men, and that we have to sort of accept this. I think that part of it is there is a kind of outlaw or a law-breaking element, an Oedipal drama in great revolutionary thinkers, and it's just that women don't like to cause pain. I think that's one of the reasons why women have not made great revolutionary art. And also, I say secondly, that men have a greater capacity for obsessiveness or tunnel vision. Another one of my one-liners is, there is no female Mozart because there is no female Jack the Ripper. So for me, both genius and crime are deviations from the human norm. I feel that women are more realistic, more centered, that their minds, in fact, are multi-tracked. We have a kind of global awareness.
Within the past few decades, there's been a drive to push women photographers within the art world. Social engineering has been almost universally implemented. Galleries and museums have restricted the exhibition of work by male photographers in favor of showing up-and-coming female artists. Critical gender theory states that there must be a power structure at play that is undermining the advancement of women, and that the only way to overcome this is by creating a counter power structure. A result of this is that merit falls away as the primary decision-making factor.
I kind of moved out of the museum world and into something that it still has a very strong kind of feminist bent. Working at PS1, I was looking back because I was trying to understand how this actually all works. I mean, in the 3 years that I was there were 6 solo shows by women artists and 3 by men, none of which would identify as white and straight. And with Greater New York, which is the large exhibition that MoMA PS1 puts on every 5 years, of 48 artists, 30 were women. And so, you know, the chairman of the board is a woman, all of the curatorial staff are women. And so in my experience, you know, I think that I've never seen it this way around. It's like the more you spend time supporting women, bringing women into, you know, what you're doing, making sure that you like lift each other up. So it's fascinating, I love it.
Some institutions are more ideologically captured than others, and this is possibly reflected in museum attendance figures. The Tate Modern hasn't recovered its attendance numbers post-COVID as well as most other institutions. 500,000 less visitors than it did towards the end of last decade. When I was recently in London, I was keen to visit the Tate, but the artists that they were showing could only be described as the didn't quite make it and the not quite good enough. A possible solution to these feelings of unfairness is that traditional markets for photographers are rapidly shrinking, and the old structures are naturally fading away. Although the demise of the traditional media might be a strong contributing factor to the gender wars, new opportunities like social media are opening up with no systemic barriers to entry or to achieving success. Although slightly more men watch YouTube, and the opposite is true for TikTok, it's pioneer territory, and the rule is that if your content is good enough, then you will attract viewers. Already the advertising photography world has been completely upended as AI-generated photographs are becoming more popular. Advancements within the digital and AI fields might also help to make the gallery museum system more democratic. One will soon have a wide choice of curated exhibitions that one can view completely online. Perhaps the way to shift this discussion away from the male-female labels is to rather interpret work using the terms masculine and feminine. These are more symbolic terms that are universal forces that oppose and balance each other, like yin and yang. Susan Sontag wrote that gender differences should be undermined rather than protected, while others believe that great art has always been the result of the play between the masculine and the feminine. Thanks for staying with me, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.
I've always felt that being a woman was an advantage in my job, both initially getting into photojournalism and then recognizing that I had half the world pretty much to myself.
I always find it a great advantage to be being a woman, because as a woman I have access to both women and men, and I'm allowed into people's homes. I'm often sort of underestimated in a way that my male colleagues are not. And so I've always found it a great advantage, and people are often very respectful to me.